Okay, cool. I'll assume for now you don't have questions. Let me begin by going over using your SurveyMonkey stuff. Okay, so let me open my SurveyMonkey results so I can show you how we will do all of this together. Okay, so on SurveyMonkey, when you check your analyze results, you can see what the kinds of responses you got. So this was the little fake survey that I made so that we can just have a working example. First thing, in one of your questions where they ask you to present your results using a bar graph, this is what a bar graph looks like, okay? And with SurveyMonkey, you already are able to see your results in a bar graph. But for instance, if it doesn't show you in a bar graph, what you do is you go to customize. So you click on customize and you can choose how the results must be presented. So here's another kind of bar graph, another kind of bar graph, another kind of bar graph. Then these are obviously then the pie charts, and then that's obviously the line graph. So what you need to do is, if it's not showing you automatically in a bar graph, just change it. So I will, for instance, use it this way, and then you can just click save. Now, if you want to be able to use a graph and for instance, to copy and paste it into your assignment, you can, for instance, just say save as question chart only. And then for those of us who don't have an account, because here I didn't log into my other account, you won't be able to take it with you. Then the easiest thing is to copy and paste. So here's how to do it. You look at your own computer's ability to screenshot. So if you used your phone, all you do is you screenshot, crop it, and then paste it. So for me on my computer, I can copy a question. So there it is. And then I'll go to my assignment. Let me share my assignment page for you. So here's a blank document will open. And now what I want to do is add the graph. So I go look for where I put it. And there, the graph is in my assignment. So that's how you can use it. But if, for instance, you asked people and you didn't use SurveyMonkey, but you used like word of mouth, or you messaged people directly on your WhatsApp and people answered you, then you need to put together your results. So let's say I want to design my own line graph. So on Word, you go to insert, and then there's chart. You click on chart, and then you will go to column and you choose which one you want. So let's say I will use a basic one. Then you click on it, and then it will open your Excel. Because if we go back to Word, this is a very general, it doesn't make any sense. There's no data into it. So on your Word, you'll have to click on it to then give it new properties. Okay, so this is the long way. That's why I wanted you to use SurveyMonkey. But when you want to change something about it, it takes you to Excel. So if you open Excel, where is my Excel sheet? There you are. on your Excel sheet, you have all the different columns and you have the categories. So here you would have to literally manually change what you want to say. So let's say my thing is about girls and boys. And then yes, no, maybe. Now I must give values. Now if I go back then to my word chart, it changed. So my advice to you is, if you know you're not really good at computers, please just put your results back into SurveyMonkey. Let's say you didn't get enough responses, then send the survey out again. Otherwise, these line graphs will get very difficult. Okay, especially if you don't have a computer, then you'll have to wait until you come to school, and then this stuff can frustrate you. So use SurveyMonkey, it will make the graphs for you. You must just change the settings. So if we go back to it, so I can show you again, all my questions are in bar graphs. And if I don't like that graph, I can change it and then I can copy it. If I don't like it in that way and I want it to be on top of each other in percentage, then so be it. So that's the first part about how are you going to put all your bar graphs into your assignment. For those of you then who use Google Docs, the same thing will happen. Okay, so this is the fake assignment I made. If I want to now quickly add a new bar graph that I'm just gonna make up, I go to insert, table, not table, chart, bar, and then it's going to create the fake one. And then when I want to add values to it, I click on link chart options, then I say open source. And then my Google Docs will open the Google Sheets. And then again, I must change the information. So I go girls, boys, and I delete those two things because they don't apply anymore. Yes. No, and then I just do you miss school? Then there we go, it's done. And then I go back to my assignment, I tell it to update, and then it's updated. Okay, so that is a quick and easy, straightforward way if you need to fix or add any of the line graphs to your assignment. Okay. So that would have been one of the more difficult things, to how to add your things from SurveyMonkey. So I'm gonna show it one more time for everyone, so that you're very clear in how it's supposed to be. So your SurveyMonkey will automatically create graphs for you for all the questions that were yes or no. For instance, if it was a question where people had to write something, a response, it won't create a graph. You see, there's no graph for it. But I can read everyone's responses and that I can analyze. But Things where it was a yes or a no, it made a graph. Are you aware of gender-based violence in your community? Yes, no. Using the following scale, rate how the government is doing, and everyone was, the average number was 40, so I can put that graph in my assignment. And then again, these questions where I ask them to explain won't have a graph. And if I want to take a graph and put it into my assignment, I need to do a screenshot. And this is how on my computer do a screenshot. On your computer, it will be different. If you're using your phone, you can just do a screen grab and crop the picture for the question that you want and put it into your assignment. Okay. So if I would want to use that image that I just copied and put it into my assignment, I can just quickly make space for it somewhere. So this is on Google Docs. So I made space, and then I'm going to drag and drop into it the little question that I just copied, and there it's in my assignment now, and I can decide what I do with it. If it's on Word, the same thing would apply. I just make space. And then I drop it in. And there it is. And I can shift it if I want it to be at the bottom, or if I want it to be in between. I can make the necessary arrangements for it. Okay. So that's how you're going to take your stuff off SurveyMonkey and put it into your assignment. Don't complicate your lives too much by using any other method, because you're going to get frustrated and angry with yourself. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go question by question with you, and you must then ask your question if there's confusion about how to do something. So activity 1.1, in that introduction, you had to define and describe human right violations that you have chosen. So it's out of 2 marks, and your definition, you'll have to reference it. So if we look at my fake assignment, I did it on food insecurity. So there's what I said is food insecurity is defined by the World Health Organization. Then I gave the year and the page number that I got it from, because it was a report they gave, as when food is not easily accessible and households have difficulty securing adequate food. Then I explain the definition, because it's out of 2 marks, to show that I understand it, because it asked me to define and then describe the human right violation. So how did I describe it? I described it as, what this means is a family or a person experiences food insecurity when they're unable to purchase food or get access to food that they are able to eat and be full. So that's my little 2 marks for it. Then 1.1.2, give a description of a recent 2017-2019 example of how this problem has displayed itself in your community. So this part here, when it says in your community, you need to first start in your immediate community. So it can be your neighbor, can be someone in your street, and then you can generalize it. So if you don't know anyone in your street, then do you know anyone just in the community, or even if it's just a community rumor? The reason this question is there is to try and see, can you give real life links to this thing you're talking about, or are you just dependent on the definition? So I then just cheated. I talked about 2020, even though COVID started in 2019. And I just said, during the time of COVID-19, numerous South Africans have experienced food insecurity as they were unable to stockpile on food, have insufficient income to buy large amounts of food, and are unemployed and unsure how they will afford to purchase their next meal. That is then how I'm answering it. Then, when we look at 1.1.3, give your own position on the specific problem in our country. So, position, that means your opinion. What do you think about it? Where do you stand on it? So, how I then did it, I said, food insecurity is a reality for many South Africans. I would add an extra element by saying that food insecurity and access to nutritious food is a problem in South Africa. Fast food that often is unhealthy and holds poor nutritional value tends to be cheaper and easier to find for the poorest people in South Africa. And this leads to social ills like poor health and not reaching our developmental goals. So if you are speaking about poor service delivery, you must give your opinion. What is your position? Do you feel poor service delivery is happening? Is it real? Are people making an exaggeration? How does it play out? Then this next part talks about, based on your research, write an essay in which you address the following issues. If we look at how I did it, so the first one says, name and explain the purpose of one law or legislation that protects citizens against the specific human right violation you have chosen. If we look at mine, I started and I said, in South Africa, the Bill of Rights in Section 27 states that everyone has a right to have access to sufficient food and water. And in Section 28, it further adds that children have a right to basic nutrition. So that's me answering the purpose of a law or legislation that protects people against this human right violation. So I then say, this law shows that people in South Africa are afforded the right to access food. Food insecurity is a violation to that right as it forms part of basic needs for one to survive. The Bill of Rights protects citizens from food insecurity by mandating the government and its role players to provide systems and spaces that provide people with access to food. So if you were doing on gender-based violence and you spoke about the Domestic Violence Act and it says that no one is allowed to beat up a woman or whatever, you then have to explain how did that right, how is it designed to protect people. So you say, it says that people shouldn't be beaten up, and if they are, there will be consequences. Whatever is your justification, that's how you would explain it. Then it says, describe two ways in which the above law protects citizens against human right violations. So there must be two clear examples you give. So I wrote that it mandates the government to provide access and people with food, as well as it protects people from it. So the protection as well as mandating people is how I justified it. So it can be weak, maybe my teacher will mark it wrong, but I've given my two reasons for what I think. And then what can discussions, projects, campaigns, and events support victims of human rights violations? And then I said, awareness campaigns can be launched in communities where food insecurity is high. The campaigns should aim at educating citizens with the knowledge about their rights and how they are being violated. Then secondly, campaigns in media can be created to encourage members of society to have access to power, money, and influence to shame the government into dealing with food insecurity. And then I just said commercial radio stations can have discussions about food insecurity and nutrition to bring the issue to the public. That is then how I answer for 4 marks. How can discussion projects, campaigns, and events support victims? Then the last part of this essay asks you to express your views on how the law, the citizens and community can protect and support victims of human rights violations. Then I said, our communities are filled with haves and have-nots. They often congregate together in their society meetings and church gatherings. I believe communities have to start there in bringing food insecurity into the foreground. It should no longer be easy for churches to take money from community members that have nothing to eat at home. Communities must push to create food networks inside the community through gardens, farms, and retail. And then I add that religious organizations should play a major role, as they are able to gather people. They should practice their religious tenets. Tenets means their values, and ensure that people no longer experience food insecurity. So that's my personal argument of how communities and citizens can protect and support their human rights. Okay. Then when we moved on to gathering our information through interviews, it says at least 10 learners. That's why your responses must be 10 or more from your survey monkey. So if it's less than 10, just find someone to get it to 10. Use the questions below as a possible guide to help you. You were allowed to use just these questions, but these questions aren't really good. And you will confuse people. So you should actually think of questions that relate to your study. So which questions did I ask people in my fake one? So I wrote the questions down so that I also don't forget in my thing. So I said, I conducted a survey using SurveyMonkey. In total, I had 21 participants in my survey. I asked people the following questions. I asked their gender, how old are you, where do you live, how many people live in your house, do you know what human rights are? If you answered yes, please define human rights. If you answered no, please explain why this is the case. Then I asked, my seventh question was, when last did you go to bed hungry because there was no food at home? And then, do you feel like your diet is healthy or nutritious? If you had more money, do you think it would improve the quality of food you eat? Yes or no? And then how would you deal with food insecurity and people sleeping hungry? So I showed what my questions were. So in your assignment, you should also write down what did you ask people. And that way it shows that you were legit in your survey. So don't just present data, write down the questions because you'll see how I use them later. I then wrote, so when it says draw a bar graph to present your data, I gave a sample of, in question 5, question 8, and question 9, these are just some of the responses, the yeses and the nos, how many I got. So when it says present your data, that's what you should also be doing. You must, even if you only put 1 or 2 examples of what people said, so that you can get these 3 marks in presenting the data that you have. Then, when you then go to B, explain the findings for each question and provide a reason for your answer. Let's look at mine. On my bar graph, I wrote the question at the top. Do you know what human rights are? And then I show that yeses are in red, nos are in yellow. So there I'm presenting it. Then I analyze, because explain the findings and provide a reason. So 5 findings out of 2 marks each. The first mark is me showing the finding and then me explaining it. So I wrote there, in question 5, I asked people if they knew what human rights are. The majority did know what human rights were and defined them correctly. Those who did not know them stated that at school, they were never taught this, while others explained that they couldn't really remember because human rights were not important to them. But then how would I have known that? How could I justify that? It's because when I asked people, do they know human rights? Yes or no? I asked them afterwards. If they say yes, define it. If no, explain why. And that's then how I can explain my results. That's why I told you, when you design your questions, make sure that even if it's a yes or no, give people a chance to explain so that later you can explain the results, okay? And then my next question that I'm presenting, when last did you go to bed hungry because there was no food at home? And then I show that my blue is never, 1 year ago is dark blue, my orange is 6 to 12 months, etc. So I show what these things mean. And then I discuss. In question 7, I asked people when last did they go to bed hungry. The results were interesting. You can see majority experience food insecurity and sleeping hungry at least once in the last year, with 2 people saying they slept hungry over a year ago. When I asked in question 4 about how many people lived in their house, the average answer was 7 people. That could be the reason why so many experience sleeping hungry at least once. So that's my argument. My argument is, yeah, if you live in a big house, yeah, it's possible that at least once or twice in a year, you may sleep hungry because there's a lot of food that needs to be shared. And then I added another question. Do you feel like your diet is healthy and nutritious? And then you can see the majority said yes, but the no's were also quite close. And then I say, the responses were almost equal, showing people feel like they're eating nutritious food. And then I said some of the food that could be seen as unhealthy, like amagwinya, are so closely linked to our morning culture, and it's cheap, so that's why we may think it's healthy. So you are less likely to think it's unhealthy. That's why I added question 9, where I asked people if they had more money, would their diet change? And a lot of people said yes. So it proves my point that people think their food is nutritious until they can afford better food. Then they realize, snap, I wasn't eating healthy before. So that's me putting my argument together. When you are giving your results, you need to own them as your own and present them in the best possible way. Good. Then we go to activity 3. It says, discuss 3 contributing factors that led to human rights violations that you've chosen. That again is based on your own research. So what did my research tell me? So I got a stats essay report, and it told me stuff like household income influences food security. The number of children that are older than 5 years old increases insecurity and overpopulation. So I present the data and then I explain it because here it's 3 factors. Each factor counts 2 marks. So you must discuss it clearly. So I discuss household income. I say because families have many bills to pay, cost of living is high, so they may not afford a decent meal. And then the 5 years and older, I say the older a child is, the more food they consume. That was my justification there. And then living in big overpopulated areas means that I may not have even space to try and grow my own food. I'm more likely to be unemployed if I'm in overpopulated spaces, and that is why then I struggle. So that is then how I try to get my 6 marks. Then it says, evaluate to what extent the following institutions have supported communities affected by human rights violations. As an example, use an example for each. So NGOs, community, and religious. And you see NGOs count 6 marks, so you must write more. Then community and religious, it's 4 each. And then if we look again, I gave each of them their own paragraph, and then I spoke. So with NGOs, I talked about Section 27 and some of the things they've done. Then with communities, I referenced an article that I read about communities building food gardens. And then with churches, there's an article I read about how religious organizations were taking care of their communities. And that's how I argued ways in which these institutions are performing. And in some of it, I was critical, and in some of it, I was positive. And that's what an analysis is. Then the last big activity was then human rights and the media. Find 4 pictures on the topic that you've chosen and make a collage. Study the pictures and answer the questions afterwards. So if we look at mine again, let's look at my collage. So I created one quickly, and you can see I have a picture of Banyaza, then I have a picture of cops pointing gun at people in a line, then kids waiting for their food, receiving their food at school, and then a lady with vegetables. And then you will see now in my discussion, I then discuss each of them. So I say social media tends to be very active when there are scandals or trending topics. So images, both fake and real, are often shared. In my collage is an image of the MEC. Then I discuss, what do I think about the MEC? What do people say? I say people lauded his actions and they were positive. There are also those who felt uncomfortable that he was taking photos while he was giving people their basic needs. Then I spoke about the cop with a shotgun. And I said people on Twitter were angry. It seemed like police were enjoying terrorizing the poorest of the poor. Then the regular person with a food parcel, I wrote that people were positive and encouraged her to do the good work that she's doing. So each picture, you must just comment about what did people think when those things were posted on Twitter or on Facebook, whatever you use as your social media. And then with 4.2, where it says, assess how the media is supposed to exercise its roles and responsibilities. It's 4 things you must talk about, and each counts 2 marks. So how did I do it? I wrote what the press code says. So the media shall exercise care and consideration, then I commented. Then I put the next one, not identify rape survivors of sexual violence, etc., then I commented. The media may strongly advocate their own views, then I commented. They must exercise exceptional care and consideration, then I commented. So these rules I took directly from the Press Council, and then I referenced it. The Press Council 2020, these are their rules, and then I picked 4, I quoted them, then I explained them. So if you guys just work through this document on Edmodo, you should really be able to get through everything and be able to have good questions if you are stuck somewhere, okay? So my advice to you is really work through it, go step by step, watch this video again if you've come very late because I'm gonna post it. Then you'll be able to just see where you're going wrong. Message me on WhatsApp if you're really struggling so that I can help you. But because in the beginning of the lesson, I gave people chances to ask questions, they weren't. If you're too scared or if you are still stuck or if you're procrastinating, then please ask me over WhatsApp, okay? Next week will be a actual content lesson, so it won't be on the project. So between now and next week, just ask me your questions on WhatsApp.